Hello and welcome to Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine, a new Deep Space Nine episode by episode review done by me, Keith Varney, and my buddy, Mike Indeglio, who has never seen the show and knows almost nothing about Star Trek. So I'm going to guide him through the legendary series Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Today we are talking about Season 1, Episode 1, Emissary. It is the pilot for Deep Space Nine. It is the pilot for us. So as we gave them a little bit of rope to play with to sort out what they wanted to be doing and their technical difficulties and characterization, please do the same for us. Mike, how's it going? Are you excited to begin the journey of Deep Space Nine?
I am excited. Let's acknowledge first that we got the intro correct.
We did. It almost took us about 45 minutes to practice the cues. So we're going to tighten that up.
That you'll learn is part of our joie de vivre. We like to overdo it if it can be overdone. And I'm super excited, Keith. I want to say I have nothing against Star Trek. None of my friends growing up watched the show. It wasn't something that was in our zeitgeist. I have a passing familiarity with the universe, obviously from the original series, which I didn't really watch. But Next Generation was if I was home sick from school, I would watch the show. So I have a familiarity with the characters. And then, of course, on our channel here, we also have another show, Look at My Star Trek Toys, where Keith is walking me through his collection of Playmates 4-inch-ish scale figures.
4.5. There's a lot of controversy about the size of the figures, Mike.
Well, that's something we can dissect in the other show, and we do. So I have actually, I found a bit of an informed viewing of the pilot today because some of the figures you showed me have been from the series, so it was fun to connect those dots. But last thing I want to say is one thing we've been really enjoying in the other show, Keith, is sort of just taking a nostalgic trip and remembering a simpler time for us. And one thing that you had mentioned on that show, and a lot of our viewers who are familiar with the channel have mentioned to me as we discuss the Star Trek universe, is that it's an optimistic look at science fiction. And just because of what's been going on in life, the world, and everything, I'm looking forward to a show that is optimistic, that is forward-looking, forward-thinking, and is steeped in collaboration, which is something I think the world needs right now. And so I'm excited to sort of check it out, not only for the soul, but also to get involved in the Trek universe, which up to this point for me, I've wanted to jump in, but sometimes the enormity of how much has already been there and trying to catch up seems impossible. So just taking a swing and jumping in at a point that that has been pre-selected for me by a person who knows the entirety of it is I'm excited.
Well, I'm excited to show it to you. You know, you come here for an optimistic version of the future and collaboration, and I'm going to take you into the darkest, most pessimistic Star Trek series out there.
Okay, well,
but I also think it is some of the greatest storytelling out there. So why did we choose Deep Space Nine? Why didn't we start with Next Gen or the original series? Lots of answers. One, we're of the generation where this was our first run shows. The Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, Voyager were the shows that I was watching as a kid. So that's where my touchstone was. And Next Gen, I mean, obviously, I love Next Gen beyond all sorts of things. But I wanted to start with what are you doing over on my side?
I was opening the window. I didn't realize it would create such a this is weird for me because I'm the top layer.
It's boundaries.
You know what? I don't deserve to be the top layer, Keith.
No, you get to the back layer where you should be.
There we go.
But mainly, there's a lot of Next Gen material out there. I mean, it's the iconic Star Trek show, and I feel like Deep Space Nine sometimes gets relegated to the sort of dark, younger sibling of Next Gen. And I really want to talk about it. I've talked about Next Gen with lots of folks, but I'm really excited to talk about Deep Space Nine.
Now, how late did this spin off? Just to inform me a little bit.
Well, I'll tell you exactly. This episode aired on January 3rd, 1993, which coincided with season 6 of Star Trek The Next Generation. So this episode aired between Chain of Command and Ship in a Bottle. So it's near the end of Next Generation. They were sort of planning what's next as they were finishing up Next Gen after 7 seasons, because they wanted to hop into the movies, which of course they did. They needed to have something to take the mantle. So they conceived of Deep Space Nine. Obviously a very different show, different location. It's the first Star Trek show not on a ship. It's the first Star Trek show without even a captain. Cisco is a commander, not a captain to begin with. So it was a big leap. And it was, obviously was a show that took place in one location as opposed to infinite worlds and infinite diversity. So it was a big swing, and it was very different, both tonally and the look of it. And we'll talk about that as we get into the show. So basically, the way this show is going to work is I'm going to give a little bit of information about the time and place and some trivia and some guest stars. And then Mike and I, we're going to just talk our way through the show. We're going to show screenshots as we go. We're going to format it sort of by act, meaning the time between the commercial breaks is, it's act 1 and then the commercial break, and it's act 2, so on and so forth. And we'll try to start out with some structure. It's not going to work, but we're basically just going to have a free-flowing conversation about what we saw. And then we'll hand out some little fake awards at the end and be done with it. So the intros will not usually be this long. If you're bored at this point, skip ahead to the episode because we're about to get there. But anyway, to give some more information about what was happening here on January 3rd, 1993, top song, I Will Always Love You, Whitney Houston. Mike, can you give us a little of I Will Always Love You?
We didn't pay for those rights, Keith.
No,
so that's
we
all
didn't.
We're gonna get.
No, that's good. We're sitting a little too close for belting. The
Should've
top
given
movie,
you a warning.
I know, right? Oh, I did set you up. It's my fault. The top movie was Aladdin. Mike, give us some Aladdin.
No, no.
Thank you very much. That's going to be a mess we're going to return to.
Keith and I discussed how differently the tone of this show would go compared to other things we've done.
Other nonsense.
We've proven not a possibility.
Still us. That's what we're going to do. The headline of the New York Times this day was Bush arrives in Moscow to sign nuclear arms treaty with Boris Yeltsin. You know what? This isn't a time capsule, but obviously it's different now. All right, so let's talk about this episode, the pilot of Deep Space Nine, which was a 2-parter. It aired as a feature length the first time it happened, and then in subsequent serialization, it was cut into 2 episodes, part 1 and part 2. So we're going to break in part 1 and part 2 and release them separately like you would if you saw it on your TVs. So this was directed by David Carson, who directed 4 episodes of Next Gen, 4 episodes of Deep Space Nine, and directed Star Trek Generations, not long after this happened. This show was written by series creators Rick Berman and Michael Piller, with a teleplay by Michael Piller and a story by the 2 of them. And there's endless interesting trivia about this show that you can find out on IMDb or on various other sites, but I just picked 3 just because I think they're interesting before we get into it. And for those of you who, I'm sure most people know this, but the character of Kira was originally going to be Ensign Ro Laren from the Next Generation, played by Michelle Forbes, and they sort of wrote the original version of the show around her and her character because she's Bajoran, and of course the show takes place next to Bajor. But Michelle Forbes didn't want to do a 6-year contract, so they decided. So they created the character of Kira, which has some similarities and some differences from the character of Ensign Ro. Number 2, and we will show you this. If you look at Quark in the first episode, he looks a little weird, right? It's Armin Shimmerman, it's all the makeup, but something's a little off. And that is because his nose, the appliance that they put on his nose as a Ferengi, wasn't finished when they were when they were shooting the pilot, so they had to borrow Max Grodenchik's Rom's nose and use it for the pilot. So it's subliminal, but when you see them back to back, like, that's not Quark's nose. That's why he looks a little weird in the pilot. So there you go. And my last piece of trivia for this episode: this my uncle was nominated for an Emmy for this show. My uncle was the supervising sound effects editor for Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. So it was obviously an episode I was pretty excited to watch because my Uncle Jim had been working on it, creating the world of sound.
Let me just jump ahead with it without having told you. This will come up in my notes, but since you brought it up here, one of the main bold notes I took was how great the sound design is in establishing a world and establishing an ongoing technological life on the ship. And it's really panned well and orchestrated well. That's a note I had. I knew your family had worked on it, but I didn't know specifically it was this. But
yeah,
this was excellent.
Well, I will pass along.
He doesn't care.
He profoundly does not care. But yeah, well, I mean, we'll talk more about it. But after having created the sound world of the Enterprise D, and there's so many layers of sound that make that iconic, you can instantly recognizable. Well, when you go to a different Federation ship, you can reuse a lot of those sounds. But now we're on a Cardassian space station, and so all of the beeps and boops and computer noises have to be Cardassian versions, not Federation. So the transporters, the doors, the computer, it all has to sound different. And so they had to create, much like the visual effects did and the set design, it's not a Federation space station, so everything's going to be a little bit different. So, last piece of information about this episode are the guest stars. We have some great, amazing recurring guest stars for this, including Camille Saviola as Caio Paca, Felicia M. Bell as Jennifer Sisko, Mark Alaimo as Gul Dukat. We'll see a lot of him. Aaron Eisenberg as Nog. Max Grodenchik as Rom, although billed as a Ferengi pit boss because the character of Rom had not been fleshed out yet. And Majel Barrett, of course, as the voice of the computer. And, interestingly, J.G. Hertzler, not as Martok, but as a Vulcan captain on Sisko's original ship. So we're already sort of getting into it. So I think it is time for us to beam into the viewing room and start talking about the teaser of Deep Space Nine. It's pretty exciting. The first moment of the first new series after the Next Generation. And here's what happens in the teaser. Flashback to Wolf 359. Sisko is first officer of a ship destroyed by the Borg, led by Locutus Picard. His wife Jennifer dies, but he saves his son Jake. Sisko is pissed. 3 years later, Sisko meets Jake in the holodeck. He's taking command of a space station. It's Deep Space Nine. So doesn't sound that exciting as I'm running the teaser, but if you watch the episode, there's lots of cool stuff happening. Starting off with a scroll, which we don't really see very often on Star Trek, but we had to do a fair amount of exposition. And Mike, you've already mentioned here, there's some exposition that you didn't know because you hadn't seen. So Mike, give us your impression, of the first battle with the Borg and Sisko trying to save his wife and son. Blah blah blah. Talk for a second.
Yeah. Well, you should know, Keith, that I have documented a video form of me actually watching the episode. Put it in the vault. Maybe at some point we'll release it. Because I wanted to capture in real time, like we do in our other show. I'd never watched this before, and so it's my first instincts. And one thing, I've heard the name Loquacious before. I maybe through you.
Wait, I'm sorry. Could you give the name?
Locutus?
There you go.
Yeah. Who is not known for being loquacious. Yeah, this is how my brain works, folks. So dial in. Also, let's not speak, Keith. I know that a lot of people coming to the show will have watched it before or are Trek fans, but not exclusively. I believe I will attract people of my ilk who have never watched before.
Do you find yourself typically attractive, Mike?
Anyhow, I didn't know, I had not heard or seen the episode apparently where Picard becomes part of the Borg. And so this was news to me.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
I was flabbergasted, and it raised all kinds of questions, and I wondered if they would answer them here. How did he become that way? Not important to us now, but does he get better? I imagine so. He must. But regardless, he goes on and like kills this dude's wife.
he sure does.
Like
Yeah.
that blood is on his hands in
Well,
some ways.
sort of.
Yeah.
Sort of.
I guess my point is, I'd be pissed, is what I was thinking at this point. If I'm our new guy, and I thought that the opening, my first few notes, even in this very at the top here, is how much money it looked like was on the screen. This didn't look like
Yes.
a cheeky and cheesy television pilot. This looked like it was shot like a feature film. It had a very feature film vibe.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it had a huge budget too, and we'll, I'll talk about it a little bit for part two. But spoiler alert, they spent a great deal of money on this episode. And just to fill you in, I can hear fans screaming, "You haven't seen Best of Both Worlds," because it's kind of a biggie. Probably the most famous episode of possibly Star Trek period.
Okay.
Was the two-parter from season 3 to season 4, Best of Both Worlds, from The Next Generation. So yes, very briefly, I don't want to spoil too much for Mike because he should probably just watch that. That's fun. But yes, Picard is captured by the Borg and Borgified as Locutus and is leading the attack of the cube. And Wolf 359 is famous in Trek lore and in sort of Star Trek history as the Federation tried to battle the cube, and they sent every ship they had, right? And the cube just obliterated them all. And so this happened in the Best of Both Worlds. So this flashback, we're seeing sort of a side piece of information from the Next Gen to find out that Sisko was a part of this battle. They just basically got their asses kicked. So it's a great way to tie in, and for the Next Gen fans, it's an Easter egg for the Next Gen fans to have this character have this tragic start, which is always a great place to start from a character with a character from a writing standpoint. And it's interesting here to have him have a son, right? Because Picard doesn't have kids, never had kids, never liked kids. That was part of the defining part of his character. And so your next lead of the Star Trek show not only likes kids but has a kid. And so he has Jake there. So you know what? I could be showing you these things. I forgot about our screenshots here.
I know,
but here we have
you wield a lot of power.
I have so much power. So that's J.G. Hertzler as the captain of Sisko's ship. But as a Vulcan captain, eventually, to become the iconic character of Martok. But you can see some of the money they put into the show here with these battle scenes. And they had to recreate a lot of the stuff from Best of Both Worlds. We didn't really see the Battle of Wolf 359 on Next Gen, mainly because they didn't have the budget to do it. And so here we're able to actually show some of it. And at this point, this isn't CGI. These are actual models that they had to build and create and put together. And obviously, is there a cooler look for Picard than Locutus? I mean, it's so badass. And you can sort of see how devastating the Borg cube was. And then, it's such an action-packed way to begin the show. So what did you think of like the sort of the action sequence here of Sisko trying to, the bridge blowing up and trying to save his wife?
Well, it wasn't totally out of nowhere for me because I'm familiar with that character through the toy show. So I kind of knew who he was, but I thought that what I thought was cool was how they used action to get us. They used the action to sort of sum up a lot of the details and set up the world without having to go through a ton of like verbal or scroll exposition. So I thought it was what I wrote down. What I felt was that it was a really great emotional introduction to the world without so much It's it's very universal there. Blow it up. My family. Here's my kid. My what I assumed was his wife got killed.
Yep.
So I thought it was a cool emotional stake set quickly.
Yeah. So and you set
I
up a
will
tragic.
say, I mean,
Yeah.
we're keeping it 100% on the show, right?
Yeah. Of
Okay.
course.
I also had my first worry. I
Oh,
felt
okay.
because I'm introduced real quickly to our new commander whose speech pattern belies. I thought, oh no, is he going to be bad? Like, he's going to be a bad actor. And kid actors are very challenging too. And Jake didn't
Hmm.
give me the initial strongest kind of vibe. So that's my feelings. I like the world. I like the stakes. I'm a little skeptical of potentially two of our main characters.
Okay. All right. Well, I totally see that. It's it's tough. It's a pilot. I mean, there's a lot that
Exactly. Yeah.
you're having to do there. I think you will. I I imagine that your concerns will be will be addressed. I don't think you're gonna have to worry about that. But yes, I know, I totally get it. So while we're moving forward here, so we hop forward 3 years, and we're on the holodeck, and we have our first sort of father-son scene where we see Jake here, concerned about moving on to a space station in the middle of nowhere. And what did you feel sort of about the father-son dynamic there?
I liked it. I mean, I can. You, there's a lot of universal relatability. It's the parental thing, and you've lost a parent. I've lost a parent, so I actually kind of get the bond you have with your remaining parent. And any kid, it's like to go. It's bad enough moving to a new school, let alone moving to the middle of a space station. So I thought it was cool, and I thought the use of the holodeck here was cool. And yeah,
Yeah.
I'm in. Let's go.
Okay. Well, let us move forward to Act One. So after our we have our opening credits. What did you think of the opening credits?
Oh, you I was singing all along. Very cool. I
Not
dug
not
them.
our opening credits. Their opening credits.
No, no, no. I was singing along when the show started. It's very catchy and very like I said, the money is on the screen, man. I love the next gen opening, but this was like we have to be different. It's very cinematic.
Yeah. No, I love that it's exciting without being frantic,
Hmm.
and it sets it up that I don't know, has weight to it, right? And I love the intro. I mean, it took me a while to really like appreciate it coming out of but to all of a sudden like, oh yeah, and then on repeated listenings, I got really excited about
Yeah,
it.
the
All right.
brass I wrote down specifically, like the trumpets. It's real. It's real hero stuff.
Yeah, yeah. No, loved it. All right, so Act One. Cisco arrives on the Bajoran station. The Cardassian occupiers, who owned it previously, trashed it on their way out. Chief O'Brien gives the tour. We see a shot of Quark. Jake doesn't like his quarters. Picard wants to see Cisco. Then we arrive on the bridge of Deep Space Nine called the Ops. It's hot because Cardassians like it hot. We meet Kira. She's fiery. She was a resistance fighter in the occupation. The Bajorans have a provisional government. Kira, you know what? Let's just go those pieces at a time. So
Okay.
Cisco arrives on the station, and we see. First off, we see the Enterprise docked at the station. That speak about money on the screen. Oh, that
Mm-hmm.
looks so good,
Mm-hmm.
so cool.
And it just sitting there tells me like I'm already psyched for the meeting because I know it's going to happen. Now we're going to clearly I know who's in that Enterprise, so it's
Yeah.
already setting up a cool showdown.
And also, if you go back and look at it, look at the size, because we've talked a little bit on the toy show, but how giant the Enterprise is. Absolutely giant, but the space station is magnitudes larger than the Enterprise. So that's cool. All right, so Cisco shows up. The place is trashed, and the Cardassians, who had previously been occupying both Bajor and the station before they got kicked out, trashed it on their way out. What did you think about the look of it so far?
Very cool. And I did wonder how they were going to separate the kind of the ship look versus a station look.
Hmm.
And once again, one thing helping it is I thought the lighting was exquisite. And so once again, you can tell the money they threw at it because just everything was so cool. I thought they did a decent job coming in totally clear. They did a decent job of explaining the sort of geopolitical stakes because
Mm,
I know none of the politics really. So that took a little, I felt like I was catching up a little bit, but luckily there's sort of universal stakes. So especially with what's
right.
going on right now, it's clearly was an occupation and now they're taking over and you've got the freedom fighter who's pissed. And so it's, it's very unique and specific, but it's general enough, I guess, geopolitically that you can catch up to speed pretty quick. Look,
Yeah,
but
I
to
mean,
answer your question, the look is awesome.
yeah, and you can certainly see the parallels between, the Cardassians being set up as, whether it was Germany or Russia or, a reaction to a World War II sort of environment and a brutal occupation. I think that was sort of clear throughout. So who's there to introduce them, give them a tour, but Chief O'Brien. Now, Mike, now you've only seen a couple of episodes of Next Gen, right?
Yeah, I would say handful. I only know him really through his action figure, and you saying he's one of your favorite characters, bar none.
Yeah. Well, he was Chief O'Brien was and Colin Meaney started on Next Gen as basically a featured extra, then became a secondary character, then a pretty major recurring character as the transporter chief, through the point where we saw him get married to his wife Keiko, and became a one of the primary secondary characters on the Next Generation. And as they sort of realized what they had in Colin Meaney as an actor, they're like, oh my god, this guy's great. So they decided to spin him off and make him a main character on Deep Space Nine to give
Okay,
him
that
more to
really
do.
informs that scene with him and Picard later. Then,
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. So he'd been on the Enterprise for years at this point. And they're like, you want to tie it to the wildly popular show, but also you're giving an opportunity to an actor that is just sort of criminally underutilized because it's already a big cast. And I thought it was genius to bring Colin Meaney over to be a main character on this. Um, so we see and he's able to give a lot of exposition from a character that we are familiar with. Of course, we meet Quark for a hot second. Mike, have you seen Ferengis before?
once again, only on our other show.
Yeah.
It's both really fascinating the creature design and also slightly grotesque, which I think is exactly what they're going for there.
Hmm.
So in that regard, it works. I kept thinking to myself, I was trying to remember the character if he was like sneaky and underhanded, but they kind of present him that way. So that's my remembrance.
Yeah. Well, our understanding of Ferengis to this point are that they are, uh, yes, sneaky, underhanded, very money focused. They're not the most reliable, but they're also not like the toughest. They're sort of wienery. Whereas at the beginning of Next Gen, we thought they were going to be the big bads. We thought they were going to be scary and tough, and they were just not because they were kind of silly. So they just sort of leaned into it. So while Sisko is touring the station, we meet a Bajoran priest here, and we find out that the Bajorans themselves are a very religious people. And he invites Sisko to come and meet, and Sisko's like, no, but we know that we're probably going to come back to that.
Hmm.
We see Jake and Sisko. They go into their quarters. The quarters suck. And of course, like the Cardassians are very militaristic. They're very sort of draconian. It's not really about creature comforts. And for a 12-year-old, there's not a lot there to like. But that's what happens. So we go to ops. We find out, like I said, it's hot. What did you think of the ops set?
Well, first, I want to kind of call out the symbolism I felt of having our crew inhabit sort of a space that's not their own and having
Hmm.
to, what's the word, adapt. Because I think that's also sort of symbolizing it's a new series. we're trying to, like you said, we're trying to break away from next gen and establish the feel and the lore of Trek in sort of a new space. So I kind of I pulled that in, and I felt the same way, and it felt actually very welcoming to me because once again, I don't have the huge back knowledge, and I felt like as a new viewer,
Mhm.
this was them calling out and saying, "Hey, we're going to give fan service, but also you can jump in." So I at this point, it really made me feel really comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, and from a writing standpoint, to start your pilot with a fish out of water situation, it's so smart. It's good pilot writing to set all of this up. So we
But
meet.
buddy,
Yeah,
we can take the lake with us.
we can take the lake with us. So we meet Kira, and so she is, like we said, she was a resistance fighter in the occupation, and she's fiery and has been nominally in charge of the station until Cisco shows up. What were your first impressions of Kira?
Uh, Fiery, I guess we said it 1,000 times, but they even foreshadow it right before he walks into the room and meets her. So I thought their first exchange was kind of cool. The power dynamic there was really neat, and also this sort of totally foreshadows her how she's going to play the end game. So great. I mean, as far as like you said, from a writing perspective, establish what the character is going to be, and then reaffirm it through the episode. I feel like great.
Yeah, I mean, for my standpoint on this, knowing what's going to come, I think they, in the writing and the direction of it, they just pushed it a little bit.
Yeah.
It was a little bit overdone, right? Because Kira is a much more complex and layered and subtle character than what we see here, and so it's a little bit of a pilot trope to, like, the fiery character has to be screaming when we first meet
Mm-hmm,
them.
mm-hmm.
So like I was like, but it is, it certainly is good to have that conflict dynamic because we don't have a lot of conflict in next gen. To have this. All right, so we go to our next scene. She's yelling at the provisional government. We see a shot of this guy here on the screen. The first appearance of Odo is on a screen because he's calling them to investigate a break-in. And we cut to the break-in itself, and we see our first shot of Nog. So it's a Ferengi child Nog and some nameless criminal dude. They get caught by none other than a shapeshifter named Odo. He's the sheriff in town and doesn't allow weapons on his promenade. And we have a little battle here in which we discover, oh shit, he can turn to goo. Mike, what did you think about our shapeshifter Odo here?
I thought it was cool. I thought it was very instantly. I thought of Terminator 2. I was like, all right, this is where special effects are right now. Plus, he had shown up in one of our other shows with zero context, and so I knew that he could like gooify, but had never seen it in practice. It was cool. I think we'll talk about it coming up, but like I was a little, I want to say off put, but I've raised my eyebrows a bit in that little kid. I don't know how old they are, but that little dude Nog is going to be used. They're going to hold him in prison as sort of like blackmail, kind of.
They sure are. Yeah, no, that definitely feels like.
I was like, that's not hero stuff.
No, it's not hero stuff. It's
He's like, I'm gonna hold your nephew hostage in exchange for you running a casino aboard.
Yeah, I mean, from the if you look at it from Cisco's point of view, and we'll get into it later, like he's trying to save the community, trying to make it feel like a safe and welcoming and build that. But holding a child hostage is probably not the coolest way to do that. But
you could, like,
it's the
pay him.
90s.
You can give him a job, I guess, but all right.
Yeah, that's not how we do this. Anyway, it turns out Nog, who is a child, canonically, even though Aaron Eisenberg was older than that, turns out he's the nephew of the owner of the station's bar and casino, Quark. Cisco locks Nog up, but he's only doing it for leverage for something he wants from Quark. And that is the end of Act 1. We go to commercial, and we come back for Act 2, which is the there's Nog there. Oh, right, and there is a see if I can scroll down a little bit so you can see the obvious stuntman playing
I
Odo
got it. I got it.
in that. There we go. Oh, we can't both fix it.
Oh, no, okay, I won't touch
I'll let you do it.
Okay.
But the really cool creature effect on the the nameless alien guy working with Nog there. But yep, there's a stunt man. So we
They gotta eat too.
got to eat too. And obviously, you can see both on the stuntman and on Odo Prime that the makeup effect for Odo's face would develop as time went on. And there is an explanation for why he looks a little weird, even though he is a shapeshifter. But we're not going to talk about it in this episode. There's more stuff going on. But as we move forward to, oh yeah, so here's Quark and his funny nose. That's not his nose. Where we find out. All right, so we get to the shutdown, the showdown for Act 2. Sisko meets Picard, and he's pissed. Picard says it's important that Bajor join the Federation. Sisko isn't sure he even wants to be in Starfleet anymore. So a couple of important things that happen
he's still
here.
pissed. He's still pissed that they blew up his girl.
Right. No, exactly. And so Picard, when he finds out that Sisko was at Wolf 359, obviously that's going to bring up some feelings for him too. But Sisko's not exactly making the greatest first impression, saying, I don't really give a shit about this, and I don't necessarily want this gig. But it's important here to set up the stakes of what Sisko is even, what is the Federation even doing, taking control of this of the space station in the middle of Bajoran space, which is not a part of the Federation. Well, they want Bajor to become a member of the Federation. It's kind of like, because of the Cardassians, they basically want Bajor to join NATO.
They're doing a little nation building, Keith.
They're doing a little nation building. So that's what Picard is trying to get from Sisko. But
what I thought was kind of cool here, dude, is so even if you're just on the periphery of Trek, you know who Jean-Luc Picard is, right? He's pretty well known in pop culture. And so, and then specifically for those who were fans of Next Gen, here you go, and you're going to take the protagonist of your new show and basically put him at odds with a beloved hero. That's ballsy. Yeah,
and have them like hate each other.
Yeah, it's ballsy.
Like your hero. No, it's super ballsy, and I really like that dynamic there. And we see consequences down the road for things that happened on Next Gen. So anyway, we continue. Meanwhile, Nog is still in holding, and Sisko wants Quark to keep his bar open to make people feel comfortable staying on the station. Quark thinks the provisional government will fail, and he'll be lined up and shot. So the stakes here are pretty high for everybody. I think, Quark's point is, you're here for a second, but this is a really shaky government here. It's probably going to fall. We're all going to die. That's what happens after occupations. So he's not necessarily wrong. But Sisko offers to trade Nog's freedom for Quark's commitment to stay. Meanwhile, we get a little bit of Odo being suspicious of Quark and sparks flying between those two characters. What did you feel about the dynamic between Odo and Quark at this point?
Well, it's funny. They were trying to set up Quark is very sort of like you said. I don't know, like a gangster kind of almost. But
certainly criminal-ish.
Yeah, but I just felt all kinds of empathy for him because they were putting the screws to him with his nephew, and like you said, he's just he's hesitant to recognize any authority because shit's just gonna crumble and it's gonna be chaos anyway. So I actually felt a lot of empathy for him. Quark Odo at this point, I didn't, clearly because it's Renee, Bergenois. Bergenois. That was pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good. I'll take it.
I felt, that he's going to be a noble character. It's just, I don't know that he can do anything else. So, but I didn't know where it was going yet. I didn't know. So what I thought was cool is that what they've done in the opening 2 beats of the show is just create antagonism and the potential for combustion right away, which is usually Trek's a little bit of a slower burn, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
no, and certainly like they're leaning into the conflict here, which was not the case in the pilot or first couple seasons of Next Gen. So we go to our next scene. Kira is getting her hands dirty cleaning up the promenade. Sisko proves he's not afraid of germs by touching one thing. We learn that the Bajorans' religion is very important, like we said, and they are only keeping things, and the only things keeping things together is the Bajoran Pope, essentially the Kai. So that's important. Yeah, I mean that scene and like Federation, you're not going to touch stuff, and then it's like I'm going to touch stuff. I thought that was a little silly.
it's funny. This is where I started to feel like that character, they're this dynamic. I was like, okay, they're pushing it a little bit. We get it. She's like, "Hurrah, let me get some pillars. But what I wasn't expecting, but though I should have because of the old dude in the beginning, was she I thought better than just random old dude in the hallway, set up the religious stakes and how look,
Right.
whether you believe this Hui or not, you got to get our Pope on board if there's going to be any unity. So that kind of clarified for me. I was like, all right, now I know where we're going.
Yeah. Well, and it's setting up, a major theme throughout the whole series. And so yeah, that's obviously very important. So guess what? Sisko heads over to Bajor to meet with Kai Opaka. And we get ourselves a matte painting here with some pretty cool. I mean, look, it's a matte painting. It's the 90s. It started. That's what they could afford. They couldn't CGI it. But if you watch the video back, there's some little details and motion in it, which I think really is really cool. So if you go back and watch it, it's on Netflix and Paramount Plus. You can actually see the water shimmering. You can see some birds fly by over the matte painting.
It looks cool. It doesn't look cheesy.
Well, I mean, it looks like a matte painting, but it looks like a really good one. And look, it's Star Trek, especially Star Trek in the 90s. You're gonna have some matte paintings, but some really good incorporation of practical in the foreground and painting, and then overlaying it with some motion. Pretty cool. So we meet Kai Opaka, and she tells Sisko that the Bajorans believe in a spiritual force called the Pa, which she can read for some reason by pulling on somebody's ear. But big news, right? She declares after touching his ear that, holy crap, Sisko is the emissary. And they go into a secret bat cave to visit an orb of the prophets, which is a mysterious magical artifact orb that sends Sisko on a journey. So before we get to the journey part, Mike, what are you thinking here?
So the second she started touching him and talking, I was like, what is going on? Because it was weird. But in addition to being weird, I am one of those people, it's just how his eyes is when you I have to reread parts of the book, the fantasy book, like 6 times because I'm like, what's the who, what? The who and the where now? The lore got real mushy for me here. It was weird. But basically, the way I summed it up, I was like, she takes him down into this little hole and gives him a fetch quest. A fetch quest.
Okay, right. Yeah. So, I mean,
go get the orbs, Keith. Go get me some orbs.
Yes. So she says we learn that there are 9 orbs that appeared in the sky millennia ago, and the Cardassians stole most of them as they ravaged the planet. The Bajorans believe that the orbs were created by the prophets, who live somewhere in a celestial temple. The Cardassians are also trying to find and exploit the celestial temple. And Kai Opaka tells Sisko that he is destined to find the temple and become the emissary, and gives him an orb to study. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, right? But we're establishing the religious mythology of the Bajorans. So they believe their god, they're polytheistic, right? So they have gods, and they are the prophets. They live somewhere in a celestial temple, right? And they send these orbs down to help the Bajoran people. And they have it in their fables that somebody is going to find the Celestial Temple, and that person will be the Emissary, which she has decided is Cisco.
Because he's got that sweet, sweet ear.
Because he's got the sweet, sweet ear. So yeah. So she yeah. So that happens. Oh right. We forgot that when he opened the orb of the prophets, he is magically sent to a beach on Long Island in the past, where he creepily hits on a woman who will become his wife.
In the smallest of Speedos, of little trunkies.
In the smallest of trunkies. This scene has something for everybody. And so
this scene, let's be 100% here. This scene is one of the weirdest GD things I've ever seen. I'm like, what is going on? The dialogue is weird. You want to talk about clunky? It's like they're like, what would 16-year-olds that meet on the beach say to each other? But these are clearly not 16-year-olds on the beach. It's hooey as hell. But I don't want to get too far ahead, but I think it's almost Herculean how we go from this scene to where we get to at the end, that they're able to like connect it emotionally, because it ends up working. Spoiler alert. But here this is another time where I'm like, oh no. Oh
what
no,
is happening?
This could be a lot. So this scene is weird to me, but I get what they're trying to say, and it also sets up the time, the whole linear time construct thing. So, yeah. But I wanted to make sure I pointed that out.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Not all the screenshots are going to be beautiful either.
We'll get there. It's a work in progress, folks.
It's never going to get better. Yeah, no, it's a weird scene, and I look at it back through 2022 eyes, and like, if I went up to
he's a stranger.
He's a stranger and behave all weird like that, like I'd be like,
chase her down the beach with 3 drinks.
Yeah, no, like I'd be reaching for the mace if I were her. So,
but also because of the 3x4 like aspect ratio, he's all up in her grill.
That's right.
Like, the scenes are so close to each other. But here's the thing: at no point is she like, "Huh?" She's into it.
Well, right, and that is the part that strains the most credulity, right? Because he goes in like it's the worst, cheesiest, like, "Don't I know you from somewhere? I know we're gonna get married, baby." And it's like, that's so creepy.
I'm a chef. Let me cook you food. We met at a party last night. She's like, "No, I don't think we did." He's like, "Yes, we did."
Yeah. No. Yeah. So I think hard no on Cisco's game for that scene. But we move on anyway into Act 3, where late at night in Cisco's quarters, we see the first baseball of the series. Baseball is going to be a thing. Mm-hmm. And so Kira calls and says something. She says, tell Cisco to go to the promenade.
And they say promenade quite a bit. Promenade is used liberally.
Well, the promenade is what they call the main drag of the station. And you'll see in the station itself is sort of, it has a circular center there, and that's their main street where all the shops are and all the whatever, and it's multiple levels. So they call it the promenade. It sounds a little goofy to call it the promenade, but that's what it is. Mike, you're just going to have to go with it, because for 7 seasons, we're going to be referencing the promenade.
Okay.
So just, take a deep breath. It's going to be fine. It's going to be called the promenade. But look, Quark's Bar and Casino is officially open, and it is hopping. Get the galaxy's greatest drinks, Dabo tables, and underboob. With some, look, for 1993 me, I'm like, oh my God, underboob. It was a big deal. We get a quick shot of Rom, who at this point is billed as Ferengi pit boss and acts nothing like Rom. We will know and love later. But yeah, so we see what Quark's Bar and what that's all like. What was your impression about it? Of it?
I'm confused because, or is it later that they shut it down? Because I got confused because I'm like, didn't they ask him to do this? But that's later, isn't it? I'm getting ahead of myself.
That's later. Okay. Yeah. That's later.
Yeah, bar's cool, man. It's I had to live in a casino once for 6 months, so it spoke to me.
You get it? Yeah, yeah. I mean, and obviously there's a cantina from Star Wars kind of a feel here. But
Yeah.
it
Oh, especially
allows.
when they're playing that little like ding ding ding. They're playing the little.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're doing all of that. But it certainly gives the makeup effects and costume designers a chance to flex a little bit.
Mhm.
And and it's going to be, for each of these things that we're seeing, because it's a pilot, we're establishing not only characters but locations. And these are the huge gigantic sets that they
Mhm.
built for this. So when you have the bridge ops, that's a huge set piece. Quark's bar is a huge set piece, and these are all important parts in the promenade itself of the show going on. So it's cool for someone who's seen the show a million times to see the first entrances of all of these major pieces of the show. All right, so moving forward at the airlock, guess who shows up? Oh, we see some great shots of the outside. We see Dr. Bashir and Dax are arriving here in ill-fitting next-gen uniforms. Our young Dr. Bashir has the hots for Dax, but she's actually a 328-year-old Trill in a new host body. And we find in this that Cisco was BFFs with the old host, who was a randy old dude we'll learn more about later, and is only mildly weirded out by the fact that Dax is now a young woman. So tell me your first impressions of Dr. Bashir and Dax here.
You that exactly as it was presented is how I felt. I was like, I got all of the Dateline NBC To Catch a Predator vibes when he was like, "Oh, he doesn't know that you're 300 years old man." And I was like, "This is weird." But then all the Trill stuff we had talked about started coming back to me, and I remember
Mm-hmm.
staying home from school once and seeing an episode where Riker was a Trill, and was like the
He was
Trill in
briefly
Riker
a
was
host.
trying to hook up. Yeah, it was
That's
a whole
that's
thing.
that's right. That's right. And that was the episode that established the species of Trill, which gets a rewrite here for this. But
Okay.
that was what we're referring to.
So
And
yeah, but I did clock that clearly Cisco has a lot of faith in the expertise of um
Dax.
Dax. Yeah. So and we don't get much about the other kid except he's a horny little dude. So we'll see. Well, I mean, what? That's what the scene
Dr.
presents.
Bashir, the kid is a horny little dude.
Well, thus
Not
far.
wrong. I mean, based on that, based on how how he's shown here, yeah, that's basically how it is. But we're gonna learn a little bit more about him back at sickbay, and we Mike says he's a horny little dude. I call him an arrogant twit.
Okay, well, it's a good start.
Where we see him sort of be condescending to Kira about calling her home planet the Wild West frontier, and how he's going to be a genius doctor. So, yeah, it's not a great first impression for Dr. Bashir.
No, but it does set up it gives him a journey, which is an arc,
Yes.
which is what you want. It's a pilot.
Yep, absolutely. So we go forward. Oh, yeah, so there's Kira putting the arrogant twit in his place. So we go to the science lab, where Dax, now wearing what looks like the correct uniform, rather than a random one off an extras rack, is studying the orb with Cisco. Don't touch the orb, Dax. Well, she touches the orb. And we get a flashback of the Dax symbiote being transferred between the previous host, Kurjan, and the current host, Jadzia. So, Mike, what did you think of this flashback here?
The worm thing is weird. The trails look weird. They don't look weird. They make me feel weird. I think is what's important. And I had a question here because I don't
Yes.
know it. Does the human retain any consciousness? Like, do they make a decision that are the hosts? Do they offer themselves, or is it like an honor? Remind me how it works.
Yes. Well, excellent question. And because the answer is different in the Next Generation
Oh.
episode that you saw and the rewrite of the Trills now. In the first appearance of the Trills in the Next Generation, the hosts, the bodies lost all of their consciousness, and the worm, basically the symbiote, had complete control of the consciousness, right? But for Deep Space Nine, the rewrite is they share consciousness, so that each of the previous hosts' consciousness merge with each new host as it comes along. So this person has 7 lifetimes of experiences and 7 different personalities within them. All, and so the host has a lot of agency, right? So it's still, so the way the name works, Dax is the symbiote, Jadzia is the host. So her name is Jadzia Dax. And so
okay.
And so it is a great honor, and it is something that is very competitive to become a host. And so Jadzia, the person, adds to her consciousness Dax, including the consciousness of all the previous hosts. So yeah, it's really interesting, and obviously we're going to get into it a lot and learn a lot more about that. But we got to see what Curzon looked like before, and see how the worm is turned, so to speak. So moving forward, another great shot of that model. My goodness. So we see O'Brien back on the bridge of the Enterprise D. And O'Brien, who has been working on the station for a while now, goes back to say goodbye to the Enterprise. Apparently, he had to change back into his old uniform to do it. Not sure why.
Catch that, yeah.
But he has a nice scene with Captain Picard, who is a nice boss.
Yeah, and I thought that I wasn't really aware of how much history they had, and as I mentioned at the top, they were able to really capture it in this scene. You could sense a relationship that has developed.
Yeah, and it was good to have him go back to the old transporter room, because he was the transporter chief, and most of his scenes were there. It's a little odd to have only Picard say goodbye. But that's the only next gen guest star they could afford for this episode. So Geordi, Data,
they
your
said
wife.
Goodbye earlier. You missed the scene.
Yeah. Say goodbye. Yeah, exactly. So you're gonna get Patrick Stewart, because he's already paid for the day, and a speaking extra. All right, so we go on to Act 4. As soon as the Enterprise leaves, in comes the Cardassians, and led by none other than Gul Dukat, who used to be in charge of the station during the occupation. He seems nice. He's super interested in the orb. Sisko lies and pretends he doesn't know about it.
I've never seen that orb.
Never seen that orb.
That poker face. I wrote down in my notes, Sisko's poker face, re-orb, not great.
Well, I don't think it was necessarily a poker face. I think they were doing a dance where they both knew they were lying to each other.
They were doing a dance with some clunky dialogue, buddy.
I think the subtext of like, yeah, that's right, Dukat. What are you gonna do? But yes, also possibly clunky. But so anyway, so we saw the Cardassian ship for the first time. We saw the Cardassian makeup, and like, what did you think about the look of the Cardassians?
We've explored that before on the other show, and it's funny. Often, because of the screenshots, I'll say on the toy show, "Wow, I think the model's even cooler looking than the character on screen." But this episode made me think differently, because I wrote, like, how long does it take him to get in costume makeup? Whereas like Sisko just gets to roll in an hour before we start shooting. This guy's got to be there probably 6 hours.
Yeah, talk to Michael Dorn. Yeah. But I mean, they had debuted this on an episode of Next Gen, but I imagine they had already started speculating that this might be essentially the big bads on Deep Space Nine. So they put some effort into the look of the Cardassians, both their uniforms and the makeup and the ship. It looks awesome.
But I do like, even though it's like general bad guy stakes, I do like the feeling of the omnipresent oppressor. Obviously, yes, Federation's stepping in and we're kind of nation building, yet the old conflict has gone nowhere.
Yeah, and they're right next door.
Yeah.
And they're a whole part of this. So we see Sisko here in his new uniform, the actual Deep Space Nine uniform, because we saw him previously in the traditional Starfleet Next Gen uniform. So there's a redesign there, but again, the Cardassian uniform, the detail on that, so cool. So back in the all right, so we get a shot of the Cardassians are winning lots of money when Kira comes in and shuts it all down. Oh, you know what? I don't have a screenshot for it, but I should point out that there's a scene in the science lab where Dax, now wearing the Deep Space Nine uniform, she's been studying Bajoran history for clues into where the Celestial Temple may be. We're on the fetch quest. She pulls together a bunch of old stories and has a hunch it might be in the Denorius Belt. But how can you check it out without the Cardassians finding out? So now we go to Quark's bar. The Cardassians winning a ton of money when Kira comes in and kicks them all out, shuts it all down. And Quark, in an out-of-character gesture of generosity, offers the Cardassian a bag to carry out all of their gold-pressed latinum. Well, guess what? The Cardassians take the bag back to the ship, and the bag dissolves into goo and becomes Odo. So we do
diversion, Keith, a diversion.
A little reverse heist here. And what did you think about all that? I mean, 1993 effects aside.
I'm glad we went through it again here, because I kind of didn't quite understand what was happening. It's now dawning on me that Quark was in on it and was helping out.
That's right. That's right.
That's the part where I was like, oh, this poor guy. They just told him to open a bar. Now they're screwing with him. But no, I just missed it, I suppose. So actually, awesome. Now Quark gets to do his superhero stuff.
Or Odo does.
Odo,
right? Odo does. And so we have we go to Dax and Sisko, who go out in the runabout, which is their version of the shuttlecraft. It's a little bigger, has a warp drive, and they do this amazing model work, taking it out of the ship here to fly. So, or out of the space station here. What did you think of that? I mean, the visuals on that.
Just so cool. I kept running. It's so cinematic. The whole thing just really felt high budget.
It looks so good. I mean, and that's all model work.
Yeah, there's something about practical effect that I think most people really love. And I think it's that it's tangible.
Yeah. You can tell, you can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, as they head out, Odo beams back, and of course, guess what? He sabotaged the Cardassian ship, giving Dax and Sisko a chance to go out and investigate where the Celestial Temple might be. And the runabout heads off in search of the Denorius Belt. And that is part 1 of Season 1, Episode 1, Emissary, Part 1. So what do you say we head back to 10 Forward and chat a little bit more about the show in general? What do you say, Mike?
Sounds good. Bang.
No, that's not the right 10 Forward.
10 Forward would be this
that's
one?
Yeah, we want our after show. Yeah. See, we traveled a little bit. We're in a different part of space. The Deep Space Nine, it drifted a little bit. So yeah. So Mike, generally, so at this point, you've watched the first half. Are you horribly confused? Are you interested?
I'm of two minds, to be honest. So, and effectively of two minds, because I think it was clear, obviously, a pilot has to do all the pilot things. We have to meet all these new people. We have to kind of get a feel for the desires of each of these people. But then also you need something pulling the episode along. And that's where I actually found I was interested in the sort of the orb lore. Yes, it's a fetch quest, but clearly the orbs have some sort of metaphysical power, thus the flashbacks and such. And I thought it was really neat how they were able to clearly tie the Sisko sort of emotional journey to this orb journey and not have it feel disjointed as much.
Yeah.
I want to know more about what happened, because one of my notes here I thought was I was being funny in the beginning was, oh, this poor Jennifer character, it's a pilot of a new show and she's dead in the first 3 seconds.
Right.
So I'm glad that we're getting to see we're getting to build. She's getting to be a part of the acting of the scenes where we understand her importance to the character.
Right.
But also, clearly, we have to see this metaphysical thing through this religious journey in order to, I think, get Kira aboard, as well as that's what I'm feeling. I like it all. I'm invested. In fact, I didn't even there was no pause. I rolled right into the second half. So
Yeah. All right. So at this point in our regular episode, we would finish with an episode rating and Mike's imaginary pitch for the next episode. But since it's only part one, we're only halfway through. Let's just do Mike and Keith's favorite moment from the first half before we hop over to part two.
Okay, why don't you go first? Well, because I got to think through it. You probably already thought.
Oh yeah, you'd say that, but no, I think for me, certainly seeing the Battle of Wolf 359 again from a different angle, that's super awesome. Odo shape-shifting, the little heist at the end is really fun. But for me, I think it is the scene between Sisko and Picard, right? Because obviously you have two Titans, a Titan we know and a Titan we know is coming together. And the fact that they were able to create conflict between the two of them, it was exciting to watch them, exciting to watch those two incredible actors go head to head a little bit. And it felt like a great guide into the show, taking my hand and making me excited about it. So, and I don't want this to say my favorite part about the Deep Space Nine pilot is the Enterprise, right? It's not that. It was the fact that we learned about Sisko's reaction to trauma and willingness to confront Picard and how sort of broken and lost he is at the beginning of this, and being able to see that. So that's my favorite moment.
I agree. I mentioned when I was watching it, I was thinking this is like an acting challenge. If you were to give me and you a scene, Keith, let's say, and then inject us both with Botox, over inject us with Botox, so that we could not facially move our face.
I'm really curious where this is going.
Because could we still get the lines and the intention across? Because in that scene, where I'm going with this is both Picard and Sisko, the actors, performers, and I guess the characters as well, don't move at all. They just stare at each other. There's no chewing the scenery. There's no facial articulation. It's all intention and weight. And it's so awesome. And I agree with you. I think it's the best moment of the show. But I'm also going to shout out, since we're here.
Okay.
And I like
we're here.
Different. The show shoots itself in the foot in some spots where that weird beach scene. So I want to point that out too as a low light, but also, can you somehow go from that and make it make sense by the end, which I pitched earlier. I'm pitching it again. The fact that they do it for me makes this important, because what is a jump if there's no hurdle to jump over, Keith?
Yeah, fair enough. So there it is. Avery Brooks and Patrick Stewart. I feel like I should be introducing who the actors are, but if you're watching this, we'll be talking about them a lot. Well, if you have enjoyed part one of our pilot here, you can hop over
in two spots. Okay, I got you.
Yeah. You can hop over to part two. We're gonna release them at the same time, so it's already here. Don't worry. But in the meantime, do us a huge favor, Mike. Tell them what to do if they enjoyed our little nonsense here.
We should have planned this. Listen, it's more fun when you're watching. Come on this journey with me. Come on this journey with us. Very easy way to help us out currently. Will we ask for money? Yes. Eventually we will. But right now, we don't have the wherewithal to do so. So just down below. If you could subscribe, that'd be awesome. Hit the notification bell so you know when the next video drops. Watch our other show about Star Trek toys. It's right here on the channel. Can't miss it. In fact, if you subscribe, I think you get both. And
that's right.
That's it, right? And comment below. Let's have a dialogue going. Will there be a Discord? I think so, but let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. So, please subscribe, comment. We can't wait to chat with you about it on the comments below. And, till then, This has been Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine. We will see you with part 2, and we're going to go the whole series. So there's going to be a lot here on the feed.
Oh, don't dare us. We'll do it. We'll do
it. We're going to do it. Thank you for watching KME Entertainment. If you enjoyed our particular brand of nonsense, please like and subscribe.